Matt went to Holy Cross College, the Dublin Diocesan Seminary, where a priest heard his confession and gave him the pledge. Matt made the short walk back home, unsure of whether he'd be able to keep the pledge for 3 months. Wrapped with anguish and fear, and after a terrifyingly sleepless night, Matt left home for 5 a.m. Mass in St. Francis Xavier Church, Gardner Street, and for the first time in many years received Holy Communion. Thus began a pattern of daily Mass and reception of Holy Communion, which continued for the rest of his life. Those first 3 months were the hardest. Matt recounts how on one day he tried to receive communion, but found himself stuck to the floor. He couldn't move, and a voice telling him, "It's no use, you'll never give up drinking." He went to another church, the same thing, and another, until finally he fell to his knees on the steps of the Pro-Cathedral and prayed with arms outstretched, "Jesus mercy, Mary help. Jesus mercy, Mary help." And they did. They heard his cry. On another occasion, he was tempted to go into a pub for a drink, but he was unknown in this place, and it was also very busy, and the barman ignored him. Matt quickly came to his senses, left the pub, and hurried to the nearest church, where he spent the rest of the day there. From that moment on, Matt made a promise never to carry money again. His family and friends could not believe the change in Matt, and his former drinking companions marvelled at his sobriety. Matt had a nickname, Barney. Barney is a changed man, they would say, but they had no idea of how completely Matt had changed. For the 7 years after his conversion, the portrait of Matt Talbot that emerges is one of a man intent on humbling and hiding himself, a man mindful of his soul and its progress, a working man, diligent and faithful in both his spiritual and temporal employments. As Matt's spiritual life deepened, guided by his spiritual directors, Father James Walsh and later Monsignor Michael Hickey, Matt began to study early Irish monasticism and was profoundly influenced by Celtic spirituality, rising at 2 a.m. as the monks did, attending Mass at 5 a.m, returning home for a small breakfast of dry bread and a mixture of tea and cocoa. His bed was a plank, and he slept on a wooden pillow, concealed by a sheet and one thin blanket, again following the example of the Irish monks who slept on the floor and lay on stone or wooden pillows. Matt now gave most of his wages to his mother, and with the enthusiasm of the newly converted, tried to reform his hard-drinking brothers. He failed in this regard, and decided to leave home to live in a rented flat a few streets away at 13 Spencer Street. It was while living at this address that Matt became one of the first members of the Total Abstinence League of the Sacred Heart on the 4th of May 1890. Matt understood the human condition with all its weakness and frailties. He once said to his sister Susan, "Never think harshly of a person because of the drink. It's easier to get out of hell than it is to give up drink. For me, it was only possible with the help of God and our Blessed Mother." Eventually, he moved back to live with his parents. After his father died in 1889, Matt and his mother moved to 18 Upper Rutland Street, where Elizabeth Talbot spent the last 12 years of her hard life, looked after by Matt, who more than made up to her for the thoughtlessness of his youth. Matt was almost illiterate, and to master reading must have taken a huge effort on his part. But because he read at a snail's pace, it meant that what he read had time to sink in and to sink deep. For Matt, the late 1880s saw great victories over old temptations and habits, the conquest of discouragement, and the laboriously acquired ability to read. He loved to read the lives of the saints, and called Saint Therese of Lisieux, Saint Catherine of Siena, and Saint Teresa of Avila grand girls. Prayer and spiritual reading had taken the place of his former drinking companions. Matt's life had become one of prayer, penance, fasting, and daily acts of charity. Matt had a thing about honesty. For years after 1884, he went back to pubs where he used to drink, paying back arrears he owed. He would go in, hand over the amount he owed in an envelope, and hurry away. He did this until he repaid every last penny. A 7-year search for the fiddler, whose fiddle the Talbot boys had stolen, proved fruitless. Matt was very upset by this, and tramped the city, inquiring after the man's whereabouts, but to no avail. Finally, he gave the money he was holding to compensate the fiddler to have masses offered for his soul.